Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of Generally Irritable. Now, I know our regular viewers are probably looking at my background and being like, what the heck, Erica? Where are you? We can tell you're not in Texas, you're not in Vermont. Where are you? What is that green background? Well, I'm at our house in Burlington. Of course, have been here all spring and all summer, getting the campaign going and running. So no Texas trips this year. But what we did do is move our house around. So I'm actually in a different room now, and I haven't decided what I want to do for a backdrop yet. I don't know. Do I want to get like some of our different paintings out and move them over here? Do I want to just get a new lighting scheme? Should I do a virtual background? Oh my God, what are all the options? We could do 1,000 things. So if you have any suggestions, throw it in the chat. If you're an artist and you have some artwork you might like featured behind me, give me a holler. We can hang it up there. That would actually be really fun. I would love the opportunity to highlight a local artist, give you some shine. Maybe we can make that a recurring thing. Like every month I get a new painting to hang behind me and be fabulous and highlight a local artist. Suggestions like that, throw them in the comment section. All right, so tonight we have on a great guest. His name is Myers Mermel, and he's one of the Senate candidates on the Republican ticket for this year's U.S. Senate race. So people are pretty excited. They got to see him in action on the VPR debate. And people liked what they saw. He was given a hard time to the moderators who we all agree were asking terrible questions. And so I think that really sparked an interest from folks. He's got that fighting spirit, and he wants to take on the establishment in Washington. So that's the kind of Republican we like to see here in Vermont. So without delay, let's bring in Mr. Myers Mermel. Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Good evening, Erica.
All right. So now all of our viewers, remember that this is live and interactive. So if you have questions for the Senate candidate, throw them in the chat, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And while you're there, make sure to like and subscribe to the page and help out with the algorithm. It greatly improves our reach and our ability to reach more Vermonters, to let them know what's going on in politics here. So, okay. So, Mr. Mermel, you have a pretty impressive resume. So would you take just a couple of minutes to share with our viewers? Now, like, I know you went to UVM, so kind of give people a little background on who you are, what your education and experience is, and why you believe you're qualified to be the Senate candidate.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I should just start with my education. I came to Vermont in 1980 at the age of 17 to attend the University of Vermont. I did very well there. I served on 17 different student committees. I think I was chairman of most of them. I ended up as president of the Senior Men's Honorary Society. And
17 committees?
Yes, I was on every.
Did you sleep?
Well, it was, so I made a decision when I entered that I wasn't going to focus on academics, but I was going to focus on leadership. And there was the dean of students there was Keith Myers, and he was a Hoosier originally. And my mother's family moved from Vermont to Indiana. So there was some crossover there because he came back from Indiana, and he was very interested in developing leadership within students. And ultimately, he built a fantastic program. But, even though he was liberal, and he had an associate, Pat Brown, who was in like the Weather Underground or SDS when he was in Florida in college. I had a great time with him and learned a lot. And he really helped me understand how to be a leader. And it was a very formative time. But so I made a decision that I would try to do as much as I could at the university. So I was on the student senate all 4 years. I was the only student member of the Republican Party of Burlington. I was I chaired the Academic Honesty Council. I chaired the committee that picked the student trustee. I ran for SA president, student association president. I lost by 14 votes out of 4,000. But then I was president of Boulder, which I really liked, and I had two great internships. One was as a White House intern with George H.W. Bush when he was vice
Cool.
president, which was very cool, and and that was under Professor Bryan in political science because I was an English and political science major. And then the second was on the Senate Committee for Veterans Affairs under Senator Alan Simpson, the fellow from Wyoming, who was a very strong conservative. So my time at UVM was very good. Since that time, in terms of classical, formal education, I have a master's in history from Columbia University, where I specialized in 17th and 18th century history, American history. And then I also have a degree in theology, master's of divinity from Yale University. It's a 3.5-year course of study. I mean, it's longer than a law degree. And I went part-time, so it actually took me 10 years to complete it, and you have to be in New Haven. So I was in New Haven every week for about 10 years. But I focused on Old Testament theology and Puritan studies. There are about 6 people that are interested in Puritan studies in the country.
What
And
does that mean, even Puritan studies?
well, the study of the 17th and 18th century Puritans that
Okay.
migrated to, right, the separatists and non-separatists that we know as the Pilgrims that came to
Okay.
America, right? So mostly Calvinists,
Cool. Okay.
and some Arminians. So understanding, I mean, I take away from them, right, their love of this country, their view of it as the promised land, and then this idea that America is a utopia, right? That this is kind of our heaven on earth. And this
Yeah.
utopian theme is something that is very real in Vermont and real in Vermont history.
Yeah.
So I could be ordained as a Methodist minister. I have not yet been ordained. After I graduated from UVM, I had the opportunity. There wasn't much opportunity. I had 2 jobs. Everybody was scrambling for jobs. I had a job to stay and refinish floors in Vermont, and I wanted to stay in Vermont, but that wasn't a particularly well-paying job. And then I got a management trainee job at the Bank of New York, which I took. And so I moved to New York City and spent about 35 years in finance and banking. So worked at places like the Bank of New York and Morgan Stanley, and had my own real estate company. And I would say the most relevant major accomplishments in New York that I was able to work on, I brought Morgan Stanley into Times Square, which at that time was a very seedy district, and led the revitalization of that district before Chief Bratton got there,
Cool.
because it turned it into a commercial district. The second thing that was notable is that I was named as the exclusive advisor to Governor Pataki after the damage and destruction of the attacks of 9/11, and was responsible.
Wow.
We had the only data actually on the tenants, the 868 tenants that were damaged or destroyed in the 17 properties. And so we started reporting this data, my firm did, and we were contacted by the governor and then ultimately the White House, because we had sent 2 summers before, we had sent kids with, college kids with Palm Pilots. I don't know if you remember what those are.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember Palm Pilot.
iPad. They were like revolutionary. Like you could take a
Yes.
note on a little computer. And at that time, nobody had any idea where all these companies were located. So we actually had a list of all the companies in the trade center, and we realized that they were willing to pay much higher rents to go to Midtown rather than remain in Lower Manhattan. So that type of economic information was very important. We ultimately were retained by the group of insurers, the 27th largest insurers, that were defending a lawsuit from the developer, Larry Silverstein, and had no way to estimate what rents would have been in the absence of 9/11. And we developed a regression model that we worked with Columbia University, and we were able, it was highly predictive and had a high R-squared correlation for any math people out there. And it was fairly predictive. And it showed that actually the city and the country had been in a recession entering 9/11, and rents would not have been as high. So the insurance companies saved billions of dollars, and we're thankful. And then in the past decade, well, let me just, I'll wrap it up. So on the last decade of professional experience, which is directly relevant to what I'm doing now, is I think we helped over 25 churches throughout the country monetize air rights and or their assets to produce over hundreds of millions of dollars to be used in social services and for affordable housing. And so affordable
Oh.
housing is something that I know well. And, I'm really surprised and disappointed by some of the affordable housing efforts so far. But one of my goals is to really jumpstart that program and start to build these units much more efficiently. Affordable housing relies on subsidies, which obviously the federal government provides, and I would be in a position to provide. But affordable housing and broadband are two programs that are being run poorly and need to be managed better. So that's my professional experience. I guess on the political side, in addition to my early internships, I was a national finance chair for Mike Huckabee.
Well, wait, hold on. So I want you to back up a little bit. What does that mean, air rights? When you're talking about helping churches and raise this revenue, what does that mean? What does it mean they utilize their air rights?
I think it was 1905 in Los Angeles. This concept of air rights or view shed was first developed, and it's the idea that in zoning, that each lot has a volume associated with it. That unlike the Roman maxim that your rights go from the land to the sky, that in urban settings you have a volume attached to each piece of land. So that volume may be 10 stories. From the early 19th century, it passed into zoning resolution 1916 in New York City, and then Chicago followed suit. And as zoning has evolved, and Vermont zoning, people complain about Vermont zoning. It's not as sophisticated as the urban centers, and I can see the path that it's taking. And there's certainly some pitfalls to avoid, but I think Vermont is still wrestling with this idea that it's moving from a rural economy, to a more urban one, especially with a lot of the zoning. Because I think our zoning will develop, but the idea with air rights.
Yes. So did they sell their volume or something? Or
well, let's say there's a volume of air for each lot, and let's say that the FAR multiple is 10, or the floor area.
Hold on. Okay, so hold on. You're talking to people who don't know anything that you're talking about. So 4A ratio stuff. Give it like one sentence. Explain what it is to help to sell air rights.
Well, so to back up even further, right?
Okay.
The Supreme Court has enfranchised. It originally started that this idea that other property owners could exert their influence over your property, right, was not an idea that the founders had, and that private property was exclusive to the owner, right? But zoning is an intrusion on that, if you will. And it happened originally because of stockyards and leather tanning facilities and the production of noxious gas or fumes. So there were laws passed that prohibited the placement of stockyards or leather tanning facilities in certain areas, and that was the beginning of zoning. And everything has worked on top of that, right? Codified most strongly in the 78 decision, Penn Central versus City of New York, right? Where they use this concept of utilitarianism, which was developed by Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century, who advanced this idea of the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Okay.
Right? The greatest good for the greatest number of people sounds like a good concept, except when there's only one person paying for it, right? And there's this tension between the greatest good for the greatest number of people and the person's right to do with the property what they want, right? And and this idea of an unjust taking, and that's what the government has crafted this whole system, that the individual property owner has to bear all these burdens for the public, but isn't able to get compensation from the public.
Okay. I am wholly lost about how that relates to air rights right now, but
so air rights, right? It's the determination of just what volume is left. So if you have a lot and there's a church on it, and the church is 2 stories tall, and you could build a 10-story building, then basically you have 8 stories of air rights that you can sell or transfer. And there are rules and laws about where those can be
so is it like billboards? Do you build billboards? Do you build the building bigger?
It'll be additional density. So in the urban areas like Los Angeles, California and Chicago have bigger air rights markets than does New York City, but these
Okay.
air rights can be transferred for density. So if you imagine one of our most dense places, probably Church Street, right in Burlington.
Yep.
If you had smaller, the smaller buildings would be allowed to contribute their air rights to make much larger buildings.
Okay, so in other words, what you're saying is if I have a 2-story building and I would be
Mhm.
allowed a 4-story building, I can sell my 2 stories to some other building to do a 6-story building.
Exactly. That's it.
Okay. Okay, we can move on from this topic now.
Well, no,
That sounds
right,
great.
but all this plays in, right? All this zoning, right, and land use plays into affordable housing,
Okay,
um, right, and informs affordable housing. So that's
got it.
some of the experience that I bring. I know that some people are very interested in it, and some people find it very boring. So I
Well,
don't
this
know.
is really the most important thing for a show like this for people who have no experience
Mhm,
with the topics is to just try to, give a layman's terms response for what that would mean for people and what
mhm,
that would look like. So we've actually had that conversation here in Burlington, like you mentioned. So buildings are allowed to be a certain height, and so they have been trying to change the zoning laws to allow for infill construction and to do some of those things. But Burlington residents don't like change here, so it's pretty special when you try to build stuff. So
Well, it's
now,
a kind of a cap and trade system, and just to look forward, I mean, a
yeah,
lot of the larger cities are now trying to move to a cap and trade on carbon gas,
hmm
right? That
in it,
that
but
tenancy no longer is carbon gas.
in a state like Vermont that already sequesters carbon, though, and we actually have the cleanest energy grid in the country, so we might
It
be getting in
doesn't
the
seem
weeds with
like
that.
the appetite for additional savings, but that's a whole different topic. But
Yeah, so we'll move on.
all right.
So you've mentioned affordable housing
Mhm.
is really important to you and that you have some experience with that. What are some other priorities that you have that
As
you
a
would like
businessman,
to
my priority has really been the economy,
mm,
right?
okay,
Because right, inflation is almost like a tax on low and moderate income
true.
Vermonters, and as I was gathering my petitions and as I've been talking to literally hundreds or thousands of Vermonters, they all tell me that they're trying to juggle, prices of food, fuel, heating fuel, gasoline, prescription drugs, and they don't have any room, and
Mm,
they're not able to pay all their bills at one time, and they're slowly losing their savings. And inflation has put things under tremendous
mm,
pressure, especially low and moderate income Vermonters. And so my emphasis is on on getting the economy to function better. And so I have a 6-point economic plan to do that.
excellent.
And the Senate is the one seat, right, where Vermont has the opportunity to influence the national economy, right? So one
Mm,
one of the first things I would do would be to cut wasteful spending. I would be there to cut taxes on a state and national level. I would also want to see the deregulation of businesses. Currently, they're trying to regulate like meat and chicken and oil. I would look for the deregulation of businesses. I would turn the spigot back on for drilling in an environmentally sensitive way, but try to restore energy independence because energy independent, the cost of energy is underneath a lot of our inflation. And to
mm,
the extent we can bring energy costs down, that will reduce inflation. Next, I'd like to see the Federal Reserve raise rates slowly to cool the economy. Unfortunately, the the Secretary of the Treasury and the Fed had bowed to political pressure and had not raised rates. They should have done it earlier. It was really political pressure so the Democrats could have smooth sailing in November, but
mm,
unfortunately, they produced an economic crisis in the meantime. In addition to like the Federal Reserve to sell assets off its bloated balance sheet, which I think is at $9 trillion. Lastly, and I've been calling for this for 6 weeks, and I guess now somebody in I guess Sununu in New Hampshire just picked it up, which is asking for the firing of Janet Yellen because she admitted two
yes.
weeks ago that she did not understand the path that inflation would take.
I'm
So,
like, I feel like that should be leadership disqualifying. I knew that
yeah, kind of.
inflation was going to come, and I'm just a lowly accountant from Vermont. Anybody that saw the stimulus checks that were going out, the money that was being printed, the irresponsibility of the monetary policy, anybody
Right.
who was paying attention knew that this was coming. So how
And there
can
was
the
political pressure,
person
right,
responsible?
to keep rates low and the spigot on with the
Yeah.
hope that that would drive recovery. But unfortunately, it
So
hasn't been that way.
do you
So
think when she said we didn't and oh, there were things we didn't anticipate, do you think, and I'm asking you to speculate so I understand that, do you think
mhm.
she was lying or do you think she really is just that incompetent?
No, I think she knew what to do, and I think
Mm,
she wanted to raise rates earlier. I think she was pressured. I mean, she's Secretary of the Treasury. She's in the cabinet. She was pressured not to raise rates because they wanted to have what they thought would be a much stronger economy in November, and unfortunately, they waited too long,
yeah,
and they were too greedy, and unfortunately,
yeah,
now we're all paying the price for it. And I mean, gas could go up to $5 or $7. It's just unsustainable for Vermonters. I think that's the number one issue today. Um,
yeah.
and the number two issue has got to be crime. But in your campaign, what do you see as the one and two issues? I mean, you're also doing this
Um,
campaign.
Yeah, so I would say the economy is number one, and by polling data, that is the number one thing that Americans are concerned about. They are also, housing, like you said, but a lot of that is
Mhm.
all related to the economy. Do we have a good regulatory environment where people feel like they want to build, like they want to invest in new property and housing? Or have we set it up to run investors off? And in Vermont, we see that we've set up an environment that runs investors off. So I agree with you. We need to make sure that I think this is one of the things I would like to suggest. Let me know what you would think about this at a federal level. Requiring any bill, particularly if it has appropriations of any kind, right? So if it's going to take money out of American people's pockets, or have a policy about the way we treat people or handle certain circumstances. I think it should have to include a sunset clause or a reevaluation clause or something like that. This thing that we've decided we want to do, every, 4 years we need to reevaluate whether or not it's actually working.
When you say this thing we've decided to do, you're saying any priority?
Yeah, so like let's say what would be a good example? So
Well, the
as an
things without, I mean, I think there is finality to each funding measure, right? I mean, the
mm,
money there, other, not even the military has an endless source of appropriations, right?
I mean, it depends. I think it depends. I think there are some things that they have to vote on again, but there are some
Mhm.
things that are I don't like the Hyde Amendment has to be reinstated every so often. Um, but I think
Are you
every bill
talking
should
about
have that.
this idea that, the executive agencies like the EPA and these other agencies that have really created their own authority that were given authority by Congress originally, but seems to have superseded that authority and, are making laws on their own? Like this
Correct.
idea of using public health as the excuse to,
Yeah, the Department of Labor
to
forcing
do
people to get
almost anything.
vaccinated. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
exactly, right? Stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, some of the interesting ideas, I mean, I'm in favor of term limits, maybe 2 terms
Agreed.
for everybody. Um, but somebody was saying, "How about term limits for the bureaucracy?"
Abs federal officials. Term
Right?
limits for all federal officials.
So, in full disclosure, my grandfather, my gra my grandfather, worked for what became the Bureau of Interior, and ultimately rose to be the highest level civil servant, was an assistant secretary of the Interior under Kennedy
Okay.
and Johnson and Nixon. And he was an engineer, and he had worked on the Hoover Dam and the Grand Coulee Dam. But
Cool.
yeah, and actually, the very cool thing is he met Robert Frost, and so I don't know if we have a little time for a story about my dad.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. I'm very proud of him. So he was a civil servant, and I mean, there are some, and there have been for many years, some very good civil servants that work for a long time. But one of the things that I was always that that made me laugh about him is that at the time in the 60s, when they were building large hydro electric dams, the Americans weren't able to create spindles that would hold the turbines. And because Americans typically cast spindles, as they got larger, they would break. And the Russians had developed this idea of basically curling a flat piece of steel and welding it into a tube. And the weld was specifically beyond anything the Americans could do, and that allowed them to build much larger turbines. So my grandfather had the idea of putting a trip together with Robert Frost and Robert Udall, who was the Interior Secretary. So the three of them went to Russia for a 12-day goodwill tour, and my grandfather taught himself Russian. So while Robert Frost and Udall were talking, to the politicians, my grandfather hung back. And these engineers, they love to talk about what they do, right? No matter where they are.
Yep.
Engineers, right?
Yep.
So my grandfather started hitting with questions about how do they make the spindle and the weld, and it's all in this biography the Interior Department wrote about him. But he figured out from the Russian engineers how to do the weld, and he came back and he told GE and Bechtel, and then all of a sudden, we could get. Then America had 500 kVA turbines. So cool. I just say that because there's a long tradition of excellent civil service in the country, of people serving government. And we have some of our smartest people are in government. Unfortunately, It seems that over the past 5 or 10 years, the bureaucracy has taken on a life of its own. I think about Comey and all that corruption that's happened within DOJ and how politicized these places were. They never used to be like that. And the civil servants, my grandfather felt it was against the Hatch Act to even vote. So he wouldn't vote. He didn't have any political allegiances. He wanted to be completely neutral. But today, it's the farthest thing from that. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and the United States Congress, our legislature, the House and Senate, was supposed to be the greatest deliberative body ever assembled on the face of the earth. And that's where our laws are supposed to be written. That's where we're supposed to decide how we're governed. And it's done by people who are elected and accountable to their voters. And now we've seen all of that responsibility be obfuscated to the unelected fourth branch of government that you mentioned, the EPA, the Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security, a lot of these other agencies. Even what is it? Oh my God, my brain just farted. The TSA at airports. Apparently, they fail something over 80% of the times that they're tested to see if they're actually doing their job. They fail far more than they succeed. I feel like they failed 100% of the time in the report that I read, but I don't remember. So I want to make sure I'm not a liar, but I remember it was at least 80%. And so I go, okay, that is an example of something that I would want to have a sunset clause on, where this has to be evaluated to see if it's working. And if it's not, the funding is cut and it goes away. We flew safely before 9/11. I don't see why we can't fly safely now if all they're doing is taking away people's shampoo bottles and fingernail clippers. But those are the kinds of things that I would want to see. I think the federal government has just gotten way too big. It's not accountable, and it's not transparent. And they're able to hide their corruption so much easier than ever before, it feels like.
Right. I agree.
So, okay. So those were a couple of your priorities. Now, okay.
We talk about crime.
Yeah, so we're going to take just a quick break and to give a shout out to today's show sponsor, BetterHelp.com. And when we come back, we'll talk about crime. That'll be a perfect segue. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I don't know about you, but I've definitely struggled with some emotional stuff the last couple of years. I need someone to talk to that's not just my husband or friends or family. I need somebody who's experienced and licensed and trained to listen and help me work through the fear and the anger and the frustration that I've been feeling over the last couple of years with these lockdowns. So you too can go to BetterHelp and schedule an appointment with one of their 20,000 licensed therapists. So you go fill out a questionnaire. Within 48 hours, they've paired you with someone who has experience in the field that you specifically are wanting help. Then you schedule secure video and phone sessions, plus unlimited messaging. And all of this is secure and confidential. Join the over 2 million people who have already taken charge of their mental health. We've got a special offer for our viewers, 10% off your first month of services when you use the special code generally irritable. So you want to go to betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com/generally irritable and start saving today. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, so you said another one of your priorities, Myers, is crime. So tell the viewers a little bit more what you mean by that.
Well, anecdotally, in the southern counties, there's been a large increase in robberies and assaults, and so
Chittenden County too.
Right,
definitely up here too. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and how sad that man was shot and killed just 2 days ago. And there's a murderer running loose in Chittenden County, and the mayor says nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay. We have half the police officers that we're supposed to have. We have a Chittenden County state's attorney who thinks that murderers should not go to jail.
But pointed by our Republican governor, Phil Scott, in 2017. Yep. Sarah George.
Exactly. Luckily, just a shout out. Look, I don't know if this man is any better, but everybody listening, Ted Kenney is running against Sarah George for Chittenden County state's attorney. He is a Democrat. But he believes that violent criminals should go to jail. Okay. I would not normally endorse people or tell people to go vote for a Democrat, but we don't have a Republican running.
I don't know anything about him. Is he another Sarah George? Or, I mean, it seems like whatever used to be the old Democrat Party has been collapsed. I mean, there are no Democrats alive in Vermont anymore.
I believe he is like a Williston select board member or something like that. So there, I've talked to a number of people. They have said that he's definitely, a liberal Democrat, but that he is not the Sarah George George Soros funded state's attorney. It's been proven. It came out in the news. She got funding from one of his PACs for her campaign. And, she literally said, I'm not being hyperbolic. She said about a man who hacked his wife to death. He literally killed this woman with a hatchet and then tried to kill her mother. He said he should be in the community where he can receive services. You can't be serious. More than once.
It's this whole philosophy of restorative justice, which has little to do with actually restoring anything within the community or providing safety in the community. It's really more the comfort of the criminal as opposed to the security of the public.
Yes.
But as I started to look for, but not to be snide about it, but as I started to look for more information and remembering, how Chief Bratton was very good at building the CompStat system, which was basically data about what was happening, and compiling all that data, then looking for patterns and putting resources against the problem areas, following up, being proactive. Right. I was wondering, could anything like that be done in Vermont? And what I found is there's no data to be had. So, and I wrote an op-ed about this in True North, but until 2016, the state of Vermont, through the Department of Safety, used to issue a yearly crime report. And it would be a summary of all the crime that had happened across the state. And it would show trends and increases or decreases. And it was a useful tool. Then after 2016, that stopped. And although it looks as if the information was retained, it was never published to the public. Then in 2020, when Biden took office, the DOJ started taking the information from the state with the promise it would return the information to the state. And since 2020, it hasn't returned any information at all. So we have no idea on a statewide basis what our crime information is. Now, I think the individual units do. And I've called the highest ranking law enforcement officials across the state. And because they're just generally good people, they called me back because I was a concerned citizen. But they told me off the record, because they don't want to be involved in politics, that it's very concerning to them, because actually, by not giving us the data back, the DOJ is undermining policing and law enforcement in Vermont, because the public isn't able to rally to the side of the police. So last summer in Burlington, where they had those shootings, and Chief Murad had issues about staffing, he wasn't able to present the information he needed to in order to bolster support for the police. And what I want to do, if elected, is to make sure that the DOJ starts to feed that information back to the state. And furthermore, that the Department of Safety doesn't rely on DOJ to provide the information, and that we have our own information, and that we start to analyze on a statewide basis in order to get control of what's happening. I mean, we're right at kind of the tipping point of crime. I mean, in terms of violent crimes across the state, and it needs to stop. There's a potential even worse, kind of worse event that could take place past November. I don't know if you followed. Act 254 was the act to end qualified immunity for all policemen and law enforcement officials. Qualified immunity is the legal protection that protects them from lawsuits about constitutional rights of people they interact with. So the loss of that, all government workers have it. If the police are singled out and they lose qualified immunity, the Vermont Association of Chiefs of Police have said that they think that 50% of the force will resign. So the removal of qualified immunity is nothing short of catastrophic defunding. And the way
I've asked politicians that are for defunding the police, like my opponent, Becca Ballant, on the Democrat side, are you willing to get rid of qualified immunity and sovereign immunity and all of the immunities that you benefit from as an elected official, not being held accountable for the results of the laws and things that you pass? And of course, the answer is no.
Well, no, she voted yes, right, on Act 254.
Yes.
And if you read
Of course.
Act 254 as it's enacted, right, and this is something that I hope to have published in True North this week, but the way that it's written, it will get the solution. The study that's being commissioned, right, looks for the creation of access to justice, right, and from their worldview, right, from the restorative justice worldview, right, the police are structurally racist, and there can't be access to justice as long as the law enforcement system exists. So what they've set up is a system whereby they're going to take away qualified immunity after the November elections. Now, Bernie Sanders used to be pro Second Amendment and pro public safety, but not so much anymore.
Not anymore.
And, unless you or Anya are in that congressional seat and I'm in the Senate seat, there's going to be really nobody at the federal level that's going to be protecting Vermont, because I think it's not possible to flip the state this November.
Wait, you think it's not possible to flip the state this November?
I hope we can flip the state, but I mean,
okay.
Right. If we can't flip the state, right, which I think the chances are we will not be able to get the majority, right, in the state house.
Oh, in the state house. Okay, that's what you mean. I'm like, no, I think we can absolutely win these seats in November. I was about to argue with you, but I see what you're saying. No, we don't have enough candidates running to flip the state house. Now we have really good numbers. I came from the state GOP committee meeting yesterday. A lot of the counties do have a full slate of candidates. Franklin County, I think Orange County, Oh my God. Now I'm trying to remember all of the ones that
Like
I
the
saw. A
rural
lot of
Republican,
them. What's that?
like the rural Republican counties have.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Chittenden County is not full by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of the other counties, the 13
Good.
other counties, are on the road to having enough candidates. If you did not get your petition in on time, anybody watching, if you did not get your petition in on time, but you are still willing to run for the Vermont House or Vermont Senate, you can do a write-in campaign. And if you get at least 25 people to write you in, you can be assigned to the ballot. So you can reach out to me, you can message me on DM me, or you can shoot me something on my website or whatever. I'll hook you up with whoever is the person in charge in your county or town or whatever. Will get you going, because we need a full slate of Republican candidates. So this is, I just pulled up really quick your
Good.
commentary in True North Reports.
Right.
So this is great. Everybody should go check out True North Reports. Yeah, this is very disturbing. So, Myers, growing up in Vermont, I grew up in Milton, which is, tiny town at that time, at least.
Beautiful.
We didn't have sidewalks. We rode our bikes to work, or excuse me, to school, and all of that. Our parents never worried about us.
No, I remember
And
Milton in the 80s. It was beautiful.
I grew up across the street from a farm. It was perfect. There was a stream in our backyard and woods. We just played out in the woods all of the time.
Right.
But now, and I never felt unsafe in Burlington. I went to college at Champlain. I walked around at night, drunk from the bars, in college and all that other stuff.
You
I,
drunk? I don't believe it.
I shocking.
Shocking.
Um,
Shocking.
but I never felt unsafe. And now we have shootouts in downtown Burlington.
And people brandishing guns. No, it's horrible. Well, part of it is, I mean, I think we've been too lax on crime for the past decade. I mean,
Mm,
crime accelerated at the end of this past decade, sort of in the 2017, 2018
mm,
realm, and through 2021 and through today. So the past 5 years has just seen an explosion of crime, and
yeah,
we're not vigilant, and the people in charge were not vigilant to bring crime down. And now we've reached a stage where it's really threatening the public across the
yeah,
state. What concerns me is that if we have no crime data reporting, so the police are handicapped, or
yeah,
maybe that's not the right word. The police are not in a position to uh, enlist public support or really do
yeah,
their job well.
yeah,
We have the removal of qualified immunity passed, and that means a catastrophic defunding of the police across the state. They won't be able to backfill with resources from state troopers or even from any other states at the same time, right? If we allow progressives to take these federal seats, right? Can you imagine? I mean, Becca Ballant is not for gun control; she's for gun removal,
yes.
right? So
Yep,
team
she
with
wants
Bernie
outright
Sanders,
banning.
right?
Mhm.
I mean, this is why people must vote for you, right? Is
Yes.
because if she's in place, the Second Amendment is under attack, and they've shown a great willingness to do any type of workaround, to get around constitutional rights. And Vermonters
Yes.
will be in a place where they won't have the police, and then they may not have their guns.
Well, and that's the thing is Becca Ballant, as an example, you want to defund the police so they're not there to protect us. And then you also want to take away our guns, which are there for us to protect ourselves. And you
Right.
don't believe that criminals should be locked up. So, do you want chaos? Do you want people to be victimized? Because if we're going for a restorative justice model, right, and we think that everyone who's a criminal is just the victim of society, and we should just like be really gracious and generous on the punishment side, well, then everyone is going to end up being a victim of crime and a victim of society. And then we're just going to have a whole community of victimized people who I guess we're then going to dismiss all of their bad behavior.
Oh, I know there's an irony to it. I think Sarah George said famously that you need to look at that these incidences of criminality as a disease, that people commit crimes because it's like a disease, and that they, it's this whole movement of the left to eradicate individual responsibility, right? That
Mm,
you're not responsible for your own
right.
actions, right? So the
Yep.
person that commits the crime is not responsible because they have a disease, right? But it
Yeah.
dawned on me, the left, right, when we have another disease called COVID, right, they want us to go into quarantine, right, and to be
Right.
separated from society. Why don't they allow the criminal, right, to go into quarantine called prison and be separated?
That
But
is a really good observation.
yeah, you just can't, I guess they say consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds,
Oh
and
my
these
God.
liberals are just so much more thoughtful and brilliant than we are, that they,
That
they
is
don't get
really
tripped
funny.
up on that.
Well, and this is what, the big thing that I've sort of noticed with folks who are left of center versus folks who are right of center. I think I'm gonna hazard a guess that people like you and I are considering, what does the Constitution say? What do I know about human behavior and human nature? What do I know to be true? Maybe I'm going to consider my faith and my values and things like that. But I have a foundation. I have a framework for making a decision, right?
Mhm.
And the foundation of that framework is the Constitution and my faith. So, maybe there's experience and stuff mixed in there. It's then I use all of that to come to a decision or come up with an idea to try to fix something. I think
Mhm.
what they do is they see the ends that they want, right? They see where they want to go, and
Mhm.
they do not care what they need to say, do, think, propose to get there. It doesn't matter if it's illogical, it doesn't matter if it's hypocritical. None of that matters as long as we get to this end goal.
No, no, that's right. Whereas um, Republicans or those that consider moral absolutes, right,
Mm,
realize,
mhm.
right, or live in or believe that the world has some moral absolutes. The left doesn't believe that, and
Yeah,
the left oftentimes uses people as means. People are
yeah,
not means; they're ends, right, and they must be treated with dignity and respect. But they use people to achieve their ends, like they're using the safety of the public to achieve their ends, right? To radically transform society away from,
yeah.
right, the Constitution, away from free enterprise,
Family.
and away from religious liberty.
Yep.
And we see this attack on societal structure, on the family, on individuals. I mean, most people just wake up. I woke up all winter long every day, just like, what is the government doing to me today? What do I have to worry about today? I'm just trying to
Yeah,
make a living and provide for my family and make sure my kids are safe. And it's just it's just,
yeah,
what else are they doing?
yeah.
Every
Every
morning,
day it
another,
felt.
they're just bang, bang,
Yep,
nobody wanted that, right? And
yep.
Biden ran as, the moderate candidate, but Bernard Sanders is in charge.
Yeah, I thought he
Yeah.
had a mandate. He promised Americans that he was going to restore stability and calm and reason to the White House. And what he's done is create just absolute chaos.
And the Democrats will tell you that. Axelrod will tell you that, right? They see it. I
Yeah.
mean, Carville's talking about that, his own people. But I mean, those are traditional Democrats, not progressives. But the progressive wing just wants him to, go further and further and further, with their anti-business, um, you know, ideas, with
Yep.
their anti-family ideas, with their, I could go on and on, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
with
Yeah.
all the right, with their climate control, with their degrowth
Oh my gosh.
movement, right, with
Yeah.
their attempt to get control of people's lives. It's too much.
Yeah. Okay. So we're coming around the hour here.
All right.
And so I want to just remind our viewers, if you have a question for Myers Mermel, candidate for the United States Senate here in Vermont, feel free to put it in the chat, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. And remember to like the video, like and subscribe the page, and share this video. We need everybody on the field this year, guys. And we have got to win back our federal seats. We need to flip the balance of power in DC. And more than ever this year, Vermont has the chance to send a Republican, a conservative, to DC. So check out Myers Mermel. I'm going to share your website here so everybody can see your website. Oh, Mike Huckabee.
Yeah.
His daughter
Sarah
was like the best press secretary of all time. She was so impressive.
Yeah, and I knew her before she was famous, but she's just a very straightforward. I mean, she could be a Vermonter, even though she's from Arkansas. You're very straightforward, very kind, just a wonderful person, very well informed.
I said, I remember watching her and being like, I want to be that calm in the midst of enemy fire.
First press conference. I mean, they were out for blood, and she really hung in there. She did great.
Very gracious, very, very gracious. Okay, so myersmermel.com is the website, and you've also got a Facebook page, Myers Mermel. So you got some stuff posted
yes,
here.
I was in Rockingham yesterday, so I couldn't be at the state meeting.
Oh, I love it. Oh, wait. Oh, my goodness. Who is in here? Is that Jim Bilodeau? I think that's Jim Bilodeau on the right with his
in the first
with his horse Cinnamon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That is Cinnamon.
I love that. Oh, I love it. He's awesome. Jim is awesome. Actually, that reminds me, I got to call Jim this week. Great guy, super cool. I'm making a note to remind myself to holler at him. There is a chance I will be riding Cinnamon in the Stars and Stripes parade this weekend in Lyndonville. I'm just saying, there's a chance. So,
that's exciting.
Yes, exactly. So here is Facebook. People can go check it out. You've got Instagram. I think I saw you're on Twitter too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. So we got Twitter going on, contact info. I like that. Reach out, people. Reach out. Okay. So now I warned you. I was going to ask you the question that everybody's been asking. There was some concern that you haven't lived in Vermont, that you haven't been a Vermont resident. And so that's kind of come up repeatedly with some folks who have heard about you, looking into you. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your residency and why you feel connected to Vermont. Like, what is it about this place that brought you back and has you want to represent Vermont?
Well, I have not heard that so much directly, but my family has very deep roots in Vermont. My fourth great-grandfather fought alongside the Green Mountain Boys, right? And fought the revolution against the Yorkers and Great Britain, and won freedom for this state. And I'm not sure many people can say that they have roots back to the Green Mountain Boys. My second great-grandmother was actually an indentured servant, a white indentured servant to the Governor Williams in the 1850s. After that, the Vermont side of my family walked west and settled in Indiana. And my mother's family are farm people, still all farmers. And my father's family, mostly physicians. So I'm half farm, half physician. I was, some care for the earth, some care for people. But I was raised by a farm girl. So I have a good understanding of how rural Vermonters think and feel. I mean, I don't look like a farmer, but I think like a farmer. I have the values of a farmer because all my cousins are farmers. My DNA test, when it came back, said I was a farmer. But when I was
born, is not a category. You just
it said no. It did. It said 23andMe said you're most likely to be a farmer, which I took as
what?
Yeah. Did you ever do? I think I paid.
Yeah, but I don't remember being like, oh, you must be an accountant or something.
Oh, I didn't. No, I could be a farmer. But so I was born in 62 on a U.S. naval base right in the buildup to Vietnam. and my father was a Navy doctor. He later worked for the State Department and CIA, but he was a Navy doctor, and I was born in Japan. And I didn't arrive in Vermont until I was 17, right? But I know where all my people are buried, where they were married, in Plainfield and Barrie and other places. And so I at UVM, I was part of a literary society that had deep Vermont roots, that could trace itself back to Darwin P. Kingsley and John Goodrich and John Dewey. And my love of Vermont and the intellectual tradition of Vermont and the Burlington School of Philosophy really started then. But I think my total time in Vermont is five years part-time and six years full-time. In 2015, my wife and I bought a house in Manchester, just to come back. And then we started living here full-time in 2020. So I think, I have a significant portion of my work life has been in New York City, but I think that's an advantage because I understand banking and finance, and that type of knowledge is really, I think, very essential to fix the problems we have.
Yeah.
So I feel almost, sometimes they say God writes with a crooked line. I feel like it was okay, right, that I had this experience because I'm at the right place at the right time.
Well, and I think, one of the things I say it like a joke, but I really mean it. And that's, what we need in Washington right now is people who can do math. And I'm an accountant. I put budgets together for a living. I help people make good financial decisions. I've walked companies and individuals back from the brink of bankruptcy. That's the kind of problem solving and expertise that we need in Washington right now. We don't need more school teachers, and not to degrade them. That's it. Becca Ballant being a school teacher, Miss Molly Gray being a lawyer, Shanae Chase Clifford being an activist and person who works in politics. Like, those are not the kinds of people that we need in Washington right now. We need people with practical, real world experience that know.
Right. I agree. Right. We don't need to send more lawyers.
No, definitely not. I feel like there's enough of them. Total random question. This is one of the things I've been toying with, and I'm not sure how to work out the language.
My
but
favorite
one of
color.
the things, what's that?
You wanted to ask my favorite color? No.
No. What do you think about so one of the things I want to do in my first year is single issue bills. Okay. So no more omnibus spending packages that are 10,000 pages, single issue bills.
Right.
And that have to be written in language that Americans can actually understand. So not in this legalese, a lawyer speak that nobody can actually understand what it means. What do you think about adding or restoring transparency and accountability in ways like that?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. And it wouldn't be that hard to achieve, right? Especially with technology, right? Drafts of these bills could be published, right? So the public could review them. But unfortunately, what we've seen is that Congress, a lot of the junior members are forced to do things, right, by their leaders, and they don't have the time to really consider what's happening. So, to be a junior member in Congress or even as a junior senator, you really have to work double time to make sure that you're well informed and can represent the people that you have. Now, I know my competitor, Christina Nolan, said that I think she's 18, 15 years younger than I am, that she, would be able to have seniority and she would be able to, 40 years from now, be able to represent the state effectively. I feel like I'd be ready to represent the state effectively today. I don't need 40 years, right? Like you, right? I'm prepared for the job, and I have a business background, which I think gives me a leg up on the issues we're going to face on the economy.
Amen. So what else do you want to make sure to share with our viewers? What else do you think they need to know about you, about your priorities, and about your campaign?
Well, that I have a deep care and concern for low and moderate income Vermonters, right? That our average income is $59,000 a year. The regional average is 76,000. It's just not right
Oh,
that these
wow.
policies have held us back. I mean, ideally, what I want to accomplish is a $17,000 raise for every Vermonter. And that can be done, right, through smart economic policies. But also on the federal side, there's a $52 billion microchip fabrication act called the Competes Act. They're putting over $12 billion now into Albany. And our federal representatives, neither Leahy nor Welsh, have done anything to bring a microchip fabrication facility to Vermont. I think that we could be able to get a fabrication facility of $2 to $8 billion that could be split among the north and southern counties. And I would encourage you, Erica, to really join with me to try to push for this fabrication facility, because it fits right up our alley. The other issue on the federal side that I want to talk about is the fact that the federal representatives just haven't been doing their job. We're not a wealthy state, and we need federal money. But in terms of earmarks and bringing money back for social services, I know the Vermont Digger said that Senator Leahy is, quote, punching above his weight. But this past year, he was chairman of appropriations. And the number 2 person, Richard Shelby, a Republican from Alabama, produced $650 million of earmarks. Leahy only got $162 million. He left $488 million on the table. Can you imagine? I mean, if I had been the chairman of that committee, I would have gotten the 650. I would have gotten $1 billion back to Vermont. And there's no accountability for Senator Leahy. I mean, it's a very poor performance. There's no explanation for it. I don't know why, but another $488 million could have done a lot for mental health, for social services, for needy people that need food, police and fire. So that's a shame. I mean, even Peter Welsh, the average across all members was 18 million, and he only brought back 8. And this is from a Democrat Congress that was completely in charge, and he only brought back 8. I mean, obviously, they're not focused on producing for Vermont and bringing results. And that's something that I would urge you to look at. Another thing, there are 2 very wasteful spending programs that I want to change. One is broadband. Peter Welsh sees this as his accomplishment. Nothing's been accomplished.
Yeah.
What they've done is they've allocated $550 million to install fiber and dig a ditch to every person's home in the state. Now, the ultimate cost of this ditch digging will probably be about $1 billion. And I'm not sure that any Vermonter will get money that will be employed to dig the ditches. It'll probably be all Massachusetts people that get to dig the ditches. But what I'm suggesting is that we make a deal now. And the idea of installing fiber is also very backward looking. It's almost as if the car was invented and the state of Vermont decided, well, let's buy some buggy whips. That sounds like a good idea. I mean, fiber is backward looking. Low Earth orbiting satellites from Starlink have much faster broadband and cheaper. Like
that's what I was just going to say. Can't we just buy a satellite from Elon Musk?
He brought it to Ukraine within weeks, right? But here's my idea, and people think I'm a communist for suggesting it, but it's just using money wisely. Take the $550 million that we're going to spend to dig a ditch, right? And wouldn't you prefer to have free service than a free ditch? And spend that money with Musk, and we'll have free service for 3 years. So that's
what I'm saying.
I mean, I don't need to be born in Vermont. I can be born in Japan to be. Why spend $550 million for a ditch? Nobody wants a ditch. People want free service.
And that takes forever, and it doesn't.
And it's not efficient,
and it has to be kept up. Plus all the infrastructure
it's a horrible idea. But nobody's accountable, and nobody says anything. So the left. So I know a lot of Republicans say free broadband. What are you trying to give stuff away? No, I'm trying to stop wasting money. The other thing that's a waste of money is Vermont Preservation got a grant of $240 million, and they're only building 609 affordable units. That's $350,000 per affordable unit. Think about that. $350,000 to build an apartment with like the crummiest GE appliances, Formica tops, like cheap Kohler.
That is how much you pay in permitting and fees and all of the other nonsense.
No, that's somebody's getting paid. I don't know where the money's going, but somebody's getting paid a lot, because the price per door should be closer to 100 to 125,000. So instead of 600 units, we should be building 1,800 units, and we need 6,000. But that's another area of waste that needs to be, reviewed, uncovered, and redone.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
again another result of attorneys without any emphasis on cost or any thought about where the money is going
Nope.
administering these programs. We need to bring business people in to administer these programs, and that's
Amen.
why we're behind the eight ball in the state.
Yep. Well, and it's when you denigrate experience and prioritize emotions, we end up in the circumstances that we're in here. That's what people seem to care more about, whether or not their elected official has compassion and empathy for them, than whether or not their ideas and proposals will actually make anything better. And it's this, like, to me, I just see so many of our elected officials just saying, "Oh, I'm entitled to just reach into your pocket, take your wallet, and just take as much as I want to pay for these people's votes over here." I think that is the mindset of Vermont elected officials. They believe they're entitled to our labor. They believe they're entitled to spend our great grandchildren's labor at this point, with our $30 trillion national debt. Plus, I think we're billions of dollars in debt here in Vermont. Um, so just, it's so irresponsible, and it's leadership disqualifying, in my opinion. So, Jerry says, "You two are nailing everything. You've got my votes."
Who says that? Jared
Jerry
Below said that?
Jerry Zeeler.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Forgive me, Jerry, if I'm
Thank you,
pronouncing that
Jared.
wrong. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on this evening, Myers. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and our viewers, so we could get to know you a little bit better. Because I just, more than anything, I want to send a conservative to Washington. I think we need it. And so I'm happy to give you an opportunity and a platform to speak to Vermonters and share your positions. So
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you for
again
doing
for
that.
coming on.
Thank you for doing that.
All
I look
right.
forward to seeing you at the next statewide event.
Yes. Yes. Are you going to be at the parade this weekend in Lindenville?
I think I will be, yes.
All right. All right. Well, we'll see you there. All
Okay.
right, everybody. Thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you for watching. And we're out.